I'm working as a senior game systems designer and have been working on Empire like for 8 years, and 4 years after that I started to work on Neo4k as well. And last year Big Farm was added to the mix. The first thing I worked on was actually the entries in our XML file for the hospital, and like I did the generic entries, for example, like the building time or some other parameters we need to add in order to make the building work. And that was my first small task I had on Empire. The most important or personal feature for me personally was the autofill function. Like I tend to play quite a lot of Empire back in the day, and I was like attacking nomads all day long, and my fingers were basically hurting. So, like working on the autofill was a kind of godsend, and I created the whole logic behind the autofill, which is still used until today. Yeah. We tend to have regular challenges all the time, but like by far the worst one or the challenging one was the creation of the combat simulator for Empire. It basically took me ages to get the whole thing together, and then afterwards like fixing all the bugs. It was a nightmare basically. So my favorite character would be Monsieur Le Mouse. That's the small mouse that's hidden in all kinds of dialogues we have in the game. And at some point we also developed like a Le Mouse event, but that sadly never made it to you guys. And we also have like a mouse unit as well, which also was never used, but back in the day it was even the strongest unit we had, but sadly now it has been power grabbed. But yeah, that would be my favorite character. So what I would really like to do, but what will most likely happen in the far future or not at all, is like an auction house or item exchange system where players can actually trade specific items which are defined by us. That would be really cool. And what I would like to do as well is like a system which allows us to scale difficulty and rewards based on the strength of the player, so we don't have those events which are like outdated for like 1 or 2 years and are not challenging anymore, so that they scale automatically basically. Yes. So first and foremost there needs to be an idea, right? And the idea can come from the design team or from another team member or from the community or from some other places. And like when we have the initial idea, we tend to create a high concept first. That can happen, like it can be done by one individual or by a whole team, and that process roughly takes maybe like a week or two. And after the high concept has been approved, we tend to work on something that we call a micro design, so like a way more detailed design where we specify where stuff goes or where specific UIs look like and stuff like that. And like once that micro design is done, we basically hand it over to the developers and they develop all necessary implementations. So in general, like Empire is a old and very big game, so it tends to be all over the place in certain areas. And what we try to do is stick to existing implementation and use that as a reference point. So for example, if we would introduce a new type of tool, we would make sure that it's somewhat close in power and price and speed or whatever other characteristics it can have to the existing stuff. And in terms of tool usage, system designers mainly use like Excel and Google Sheets, so like calculation programs basically. And for example, if I'm creating mockups, I use programs like Balsamiq and other colleagues like Google Slides, PowerPoint, Photoshop, all that kind of jazz. So what I personally do enjoy the most is coming up with new feature ideas or working on new feature ideas. Like sadly, 9 out of 10 new feature ideas don't make the cut, either because they are like too much effort or they simply don't fit or they are simply bad. So you guys don't get to see that, but I really like working on those new feature ideas, which is like for me the major incentive of being a game designer. So like most jobs tend to focus on either being like creative or being analytical. And like for me, like working as a system/game designer, it's basically both. So I can have like some days I have like a creative outlet to fulfill, and sometimes I can just chase my analytical needs and do some weird balancing stuff. And that kind of like just gives me the right mix to make the job enjoyable for me, and also like adding all different challenges along the road as well. So, yeah.